Warner Brothers had to quickly cut a scene from Casablanca in 1942, just 48 hours before it opened. The video showed Rick Blaine at his cruelest, trying to make money while a guy begged for his life to escape the Nazis. But this wasn't the only scene that went away. From risky drinks to hidden deals, these are the scenes from Casablanca that were not allowed to happen and were buried by Hollywood for decades. There is an American teacher called Murray Burnett at the beginning of the story of Casablanca in 1938. When the Nazis took over Austria, he and his wife went there to help Jewish family members get money out of the country. After that, they went to a small French town and found a bar that really impressed Burnett. A black piano player played jazz in the club for a mix of French people, Nazis, and refugees. He couldn't forget that scene. He teamed up with a writer called Joan Allison when he got back to the U.S. They wrote a play called Everybody Comes to Rick's in the summer of 1940. The story took place in a coffee shop. Rick Blaine wasn't the creepy guy we saw in the movie. He was a lawyer instead, and he had left his family behind. Lessa, who played Lois Meredith in the play, was also very different. In contrast to the Ilsa in the movie, she was brave and flirty. No one on Broadway wanted to put on the play, even though it had a strong anti-Nazi message. One reason was that people were afraid it would look like Lois had slept with Rick to get important mail. The refusal worked out in the end because Warner Brothers bought the play, setting the stage for what would become a famous movie. In a strange turn of events, Warner Brothers got the story for Everybody Comes to Rick's the day after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. A studio worker named Irene Diamond read it and thought it would make a great movie. It was called Sophisticated Hokum when she told director Hal B. Wallace about it. Wallace saw an opportunity to make a movie that would appeal to people who were already very interested in the war. It cost $20,000 to buy the play from Warner Brothers. That's a huge sum of money for a story, especially one written by two unknown people. It was the most money that had ever been paid for a show that hadn't been put on yet. A lot of people in Hollywood were interested in the choice and wondered if it was worth it. However, the timing was right. Warner Brothers was known for making movies that did something good for society, and since the U.S. was now in the war, they saw a chance to make a movie that did something important. They didn't expect much from the movie, even though they spent a lot of money on the plot. It was just another job for Warner Brothers in a busy day. Even the actor who played Rick didn't think it was very interesting. Among the 4 films he made in 1942, this was the least important to him. Ilsa was played by Ingrid Bergman, who only took the part because she couldn't get one in another movie she wanted to be in. The script for Casablanca wasn't even finished when shooting began on May 25, 1942. The first part was the only thing that was ready. The writers were rushing. It was only 3 days before filming began that Julius and Philip Epstein finished their draft. Howard Koch was still working on his 2 weeks into filming and rushed to the set in the morning. Because of how crazy things were, by August, the 126-page script was too big. Hal B. Wallace, the director, told them to cut it down. 7 times in one day, the scene where Rick and Ilsa meet at the cafe was changed. There was magic in this chaos as well. The draft didn't even have some of the best lines in the movie, like "Look at you, kid." That story was made up by Humphrey Bogart while he was shooting. Lewis, I think this is the start of a beautiful friendship. The famous last line wasn't added until after the fact. After the movie was over, Wallace had the idea and paid Bogart $50,000 to come back and record it. A lot of money back then. The changes to the story made everyone confused. Bergman, who played Ilsa, didn't always know how to act in a scene. What did director Michael Curtis say when she asked him what to do? He would shrug and say, "I don't know. We'll see." Not even the ending was set in stone. No one knew if Ilsa would leave with Rick or Victor Laszlo when the airport scene was filmed. They shot 3 ends that were all different. In 3 of them, she stays with Rick, goes with Laszlo, and Rick dies. The crew chose the finish. And the final choice was made right before the movie's November 1942 release. It wasn't just the big stars who were confused. It looked like S.E. Sackle, who played Carl the waiter, was really lost. He started wiggling his eyes nervously. Afterward, he joked that he wasn't sure if he was meant to be a spy or just a clumsy waiter. Bergman was especially upset. She wasn't sure which guy her character would pick, Laszlo or Rick. They told her to play it in the breaks, which made her feel even more stressed. She showed up one day ready to film a love scene with Laszlo and Paul Henreid. At the last minute, though, they changed it to a fight with Bogart. She had to change how she felt right then and there. Even her clothes showed how uncertain she was. She had two clothes ready for the airport scene. A fancy fur coat, if Ilsa stayed with Rick, and a simple overcoat, if she went with Laszlo. She didn't decide what to wear until right before the movie. She joked afterward that the coat was more important to her than the script. Bogart had her own doubts. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be the romantic star. He felt too old and not good looking at 42. He told director Hal Wallace, "I don't know about this love stuff." Bogart was also scared because he usually played bad guys, not loves. During the first week of shooting, he drank a lot to calm down, which made Curtis stop work for 2 days. Another problem was that Bogart was very tall. Because he was only 5 feet 8 inches tall, he had to wear platform shoes or sit on cushions in some scenes. He tripped over his platform shoes one time when he was feeling very serious. Everyone in the group laughed out loud. The chaos was made worse by the director, Michael Curtis. People always got the wrong idea from his thick Hungarian accent. He asked for a dog on set one time. He yelled, "Not a dog, a poodle," when someone brought him a dog. He meant puddle for a scene where it rains. He told Bogart another time, "Make love to her with your hat on." Everyone didn't understand until he added, "You know, like an American." In one scene, he yelled for more actors, telling them to bring in the empty people. Before he said he wanted background players, no one knew what he meant. Something changed everything after that. As of November 1942, the Allies had taken over French North Africa. All of a sudden, Casablanca was everywhere in the news. Warner Brothers worked quickly to finish the movie so they could enjoy the attention. The movie was shot from May 1942 to August 1942, a total of 71 days. That was way too fast for a big movie. Some smart tricks were done in a rush. The long-known airport scene at the end wasn't filmed at a real airport. A small soundstage was used to film it. The team used a plane made of wood. They hired little people to help make the plane look bigger. To hide the fake setup, they added a lot of fog, which made the scene look moody and epic. Things were not going well for the production team, though. Joseph Breen, who was in charge of Hollywood's production code, had very strict rules about how film should behave morally. He really didn't like Casablanca, so on December 3, 1941, he sent Warner Brothers a note with 13 things he thought should be changed. He was especially mad about things that had sexual material or bad language. He told them right away that they had to get rid of any signs that Rick's Cafe had a brothel upstairs. He also wouldn't let Rick change his line. "What the hell are you doing here?" to ask. "What are you doing here?" Breen didn't like the word broad, so he had it taken out of the script. That wasn't all he did. Breen paid attention to little things, like the part where Captain Renault fixes his tie before meeting a woman applying for a visa. Renault first told her to come in and turn on the light in his bedroom. Breen made them change it so that it said, "Just send her in." He had trouble with even Ingrid Bergman's clothes. He made sure her clothes showed less cleavage because he believed women should always have their bodies fully covered. All of these changes got rid of the sexual themes that were in the original story. The way Rick and Ilsa used to date in Paris also had to be changed. In the first draft, it was clear that they were seeing someone else. In one scene, they were even in bed together. Breen said this was wrong and told them to get rid of all references to the affair before marriage. He sent another letter on January 6, 1942, saying that there should be no signs that Rick and Ilsa were getting close. Because of this, flashback scenes were changed so that they relied on hints and small signs. For instance, "I remember everything about Rick's cue." The phrase, "the Germans wore gray and you wore blue," came to mean something about their past relationships. Because of these changes, the players had to use tone, glances, and subtext to show how they felt. This made Rick and Ilsa feel tense and longing for each other, which made their story more emotional and powerful. The filtering took down explicit content, but it also made their relationship stronger without meaning to. The character of Captain Renault was also changed. At first, he was obviously dishonest and used his power to take advantage of desperate women by giving them exit cards in exchange for sexual favors. In a scene that was cut, Renault told a young woman, "We have everything here, from wines to exit visas." This made it clear what he was going to do. This made Breen mad, so she sent a note saying that it was not possible to say that Renault forced women into these positions. The writing had to be changed a lot because of this. For example, Renault said, "If you see any pretty women, please send them to my office." That line was taken out totally. To follow Breen's strict rules, the speech in Casablanca was also changed a lot. A famous line by Rick, "Here's looking at you, kid," almost became "Here's good luck to you, kid," because the word damn wasn't allowed. The first line stayed after a lot of back and forth. Even short words were looked over closely. There was a mistake in the line, "You're becoming a lousy barman." The correct word is now, "You're becoming a very poor barman." Sam's line, "Boss, aren't you going to bed?" was also changed, which was changed to "Boss, aren't you going home?" So, as not to imply anything sexual, even though these changes were annoying for the producers, they had a cool side effect. Because of the rules, the writers and players had to use implication and subtlety a lot. That made the movie more interesting. These were not the only changes, though. Something strange happened just 2 days before Casablanca's opening. Michael Curtis, the director, chose to cut a scene that was very important. Rick Blaine, played by Humphrey Bogart, went to see Victor Laszlo, played by Paul Henreid, in jail in this scene. It wasn't an easy choice. It cost $18,000 to shoot the scene. In those days, that was a lot of money, and the video was twice as long. Rick goes into Laszlo's dark jail cell in this scene. Rick usually wears a fancy white jacket, but he's hiding in a dark suit here. Rick gives Laszlo something very valuable, the letters of transit. However, there is a catch. These might help Laszlo get away and be free. Rick wants 100,000 francs for them. That is a huge amount of money, about $2 million today. Rick's offer seems rude and self-centered. When Rick is asked why he is acting this way, Rick says something sharp. There are two types of people in the world: those who take risks and those who make money from them. I've stuck out my neck a few times. I'm now in the business of making money. This shows how angry and jaded Rick has become. The scene was almost in the movie, but it wasn't used. That was because of a few things. The company first wanted to cut down the length of the movie so that it could be shown more times every day. That wasn't the most important thing, though. People who saw the movie ahead of time didn't like the jail scene most of the time. They believed Rick was too selfish and heartless. They wanted people to be curious about Rick's real thoughts and feelings until the very end of the movie. Things were made too clear too quickly in this scene. Both the writers and the director agreed. They thought the scene didn't go with what was going on in the story. Hal B. Wallace, the director, even wrote in a note that this scene tips our hand, which means it revealed too much about Rick too soon. Cutting the scene kept it unclear why Rick did what he did, which made the ending stronger. A second problem came up as well. The Hays Code said that films had to follow strict rules back then. One rule said you couldn't make police or government leaders look bad. Rick being able to go to Laszlo's jail cell and make an offer might have made it look like the cops were up to no good. That scene had to be cut because the directors didn't want to get in trouble with the censors. There was also another scene that was supposed to be in the movie, but wasn't. A German officer was fooled by Sasha, the barman, who served him a very strong drink. In 1941, the event took place at Rick's Cafe. The police officer asked for a drink and bragged that he could handle anything. It was a risky drink that Sasha made. It was called a kamikaze cocktail. It had fireworks, absinthe, and rum that was very strong. Rick didn't say anything, but he seemed to agree with Sasha. The police officer drank it all at once. He looked proud at first, but then his face changed. With a loud crash, he hit the bar face first, his eyes rolling back. The whole cafe was quiet and just stared. Rick stood back and watched. He smiled a little and then went back to being calm. As if nothing was wrong, Sasha cleaned the bar around the unconscious cop. As a joke, Carl, the waiter, said, "I think the gentleman has found his Waterloo in a glass." Even though the scene was funny, the producers chose to cut it. The movie was already very long, but this scene made it even longer. It also took longer than planned to introduce Ilsa, who was one of the most important characters. One more reason was that of control. It was against the rules for films to show too much drinking or make fun of military officers back then. It also looked like a bad idea to put fireworks in a drink. The studio was afraid that the scene would make things difficult in other countries, especially those that were not at war at the time. Humphrey Bogart was interested in the scene and wanted it to stay. He believed it gave Rick more depth and showed that he secretly backed the resistance. But what he thought wasn't enough to keep it. There was no reason for Warner Brothers to think Casablanca was a great movie when it opened in New York City on November 26, 1942. Because of a big event going on in the world, they chose to put it out early. The Allies had begun Operation Torch just a few weeks before on November 8, 1942. It was a big attack on French North Africa, which included the city of Casablanca. That place became popular all of a sudden, and the studio saw an opportunity to make the most of the attention. The gala took place at the Hollywood Theater on 51st Street. It was pricey back then, but tickets were $2.20. It was strange that the movie stars weren't there. Humphrey Bogart stayed in California because he was scared of flying, and Ingrid Bergman was busy with The Three Sisters, a show on Broadway. Instead, executives from Warner Brothers and well-known people from New York City went. This brought some attention to the movie, but it wasn't a big deal yet. On December 14, 1942, a few weeks later, President Franklin D. Roosevelt watched Casablanca at the White House. This took place right before he was supposed to meet Winston Churchill for a war meeting in Casablanca itself. Roosevelt was moved by the movie, especially the powerful part where La Marseillaise, the French national song, is sung. He is said to have cried over this scene. The movie first came out to the public on January 23, 1943, while Roosevelt and Churchill were meeting at the Casablanca Conference. Warner Brothers planned this to happen at this time to keep the movie true to events in real life. The movie didn't start out as a big hit, even though the ads were very smart. The first run made about $3.7 million, which was fine, but not great. For Whom the Bell Tolls, the biggest movie of 1943, only made $11 million. Casablanca was the seventh most successful movie of the year. Casablanca was supposed to cost $950,000, but it ended up costing $1 million. $39,000. One reason was the famous scene with the La Marseillaise. It cost an extra $100,000 to shoot and is now one of the most famous parts of the movie. But the war made it hard to get out there. Because of blackout rules, many theaters had shorter hours, and people had a hard time getting to the movies because of limited fuel. The Office of War Information also limited how American films could be sent abroad, which limited the film's spread around the world. They liked the movie when it first came out, but they didn't think it was a classic like people do now. A lot of people liked how Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman played their parts, and the ideas of love, sacrifice, and standing up to oppression seemed very relevant at the time. The New York Times said that the movie was exciting, said it sent chills down their spines and made their hearts skip a beat. The movie Casablanca shocked everyone in 1944 when it got 8 Oscar nods. A lot of people thought it was just another war movie, but it won a lot of awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Star for Humphrey Bogart. It was a surprise that Bogart was nominated because he wasn't sure if he wanted to play a romantic part. He was better known for playing tough guys. The award for Best Supporting Actor also went to Claude Rains. It was clear that his performance stood out even though he was only on screen for 25 minutes. Casablanca won 3 major Oscars on March 2, 1944. Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Script. Even though the plot was written in a mess, it won. Ingrid Bergman didn't know how the story would end because the last scene wasn't finished until the day before it was filmed. History was also made by the director, Michael Curtiz. He finally won after being nominated 4 times. Curtiz made one of the most popular films ever, even though he was from Hungary and didn't speak English very well. His win showed how important his ideas and guidance were to the success of the movie. When Casablanca came out in Germany in 1952, it was very different from how it was before World War II. The original movie was 102 minutes long, but about 20 minutes were cut, leaving only 82 minutes. These changes took out all references to or pictures of Nazis and made the story very different. In the original movie, one of the most famous scenes was when Victor Laszlo gets the people in Rick's Cafe to play La Marseillaise over the Nazi officer's song. This scene was completely cut. This nearly 4-minute scene was a key part of the movie's anti-Nazi message, but German viewers at the time thought it was too sensitive. Major Heinrich Strasser, the Nazi bad guy played by Conrad White, was also taken out completely. He was in the original movie for about 18 minutes, but his parts were cut and the dialogue was changed to explain why he wasn't there. For instance, Strasser's part in the story was switched out for vague references to the fact that the police are interested in Victor Laszlo. The last scene in the airport, where Rick fights Strasser and kills him, was fully changed. Instead of the intense fight, the German version made it seem like Rick and Ilsa just broke up, which took away an important part of Rick's growth as a person. These changes were not made by German censors. Warner Brothers made them to escape controversy and make the movie suitable for German audiences after the war. Frame by frame, the swastikas on the armbands of German soldiers were covered up or taken off. Nazi salutes were changed to more common military motions, and Nazi symbols were changed or taken off of posters and flags. Any dialogue that talked about the Nazis, Germany, or the war was changed or written over with general words like they were the authorities. This led to strange errors where characters seemed scared of nothing in particular, which made the story hard to follow. The whole setting and historical background of the movie were changed. The story was originally set in 1941, during World War II. However, the German version made it seem like the events were taking place in the present, without mentioning the war or the Nazis. The characters' pasts were also changed by these changes. In the first movie, Victor Laszlo played a Czech resistance leader and concentration camp survivor. In this one, he changed his name to Victor Larsen and became a Norwegian atomic scientist. This version of Laszlo wasn't fighting the Nazis. Instead, he was trying to get away from Interpol after getting out of jail for work-related reasons. To fit this new story, scenes were dubbed so that they talked about made-up science idea called delta rays instead of resistance actions. The past of Ilse Lund also changed. She was no longer married to a brave head of the resistance. Instead, she was married to a crazy scientist. The reason she gave for leaving Rick was changed, and the part about the Nazi attack of France was taken out. The setting of Rick Blaine was also changed. In the first version, he fought in the Spanish Civil War and was a gun runner for Ethiopia. This shows that he has a past of standing up for causes. In the German version, these details were taken out, leaving him as a simple American living abroad without a clear political background. "I stick my neck out for nobody" was his famous line that stuck around. However, it was changed to mean scientific spying instead of political pushback. Even Captain Renaud, who used to be a dishonest official in Vichy, France, turned into a normal police officer with no connection to anything. His well-known line about being shocked to find gaming going on inside was very funny. It no longer has any political meanings at all. When the full version of Casablanca finally came out on German TV in 1975, it was a big surprise for people who had only seen the 1952 version. What many people were shocked to learn was that the movie's story and ideas were based on real events that happened in Nazi Germany. People in Germany talked about censorship, history, and how important it is to face painful facts from the past after this release. In 1988, Ted Turner caused a big stir when he showed a colorized version of Casablanca on his TNT network. The movie was originally a masterpiece in black and white, but it was carefully colored using cutting-edge technology. Turner's 67 colorists worked on it for more than 4,000 hours and $450,000, using a computer system that could mix colors in thousands of different ways. They paid close attention to every little thing, like how dark Ingrid Bergman's eyes were and how rich brown Rick's bar was. The changes were meant to make the movie more appealing to younger viewers, but movie fans and reviewers were furious. That was not all Turner did. He put out a colorized VHS version that cost $89.98 and had big words on the box that said "Now in Color." Some people even said Turner destroyed the original prints, but that wasn't true. Even so, the fear that the black and white form might be lost made things even worse. Some of the choices in the colored form were questionable. Rick's usual white clothing was changed to a strange powder blue color, and the movie's dark and ominous mood was made brighter, getting in the way of many scenes' mood. They made things even worse by adding a big mistake. Between shots in one scene, Ilse's dress goes from green to blue all of a sudden. Fans and reviewers are even more angry about these changes, because they thought the colorization took away from the film's soul. Most of the responses to the colored Casablanca were critical. It was torn apart by critics. People like Roger Ebert said it was one of the saddest days in movie history and said it was like drawing a mustache on the Mona Lisa. The audience didn't like it either. Ratings for the show were not good. Outside of movie theaters, people held signs that said things like "Keep your crayons off Casablanca" and "Ted Turner, enemy of cinema." The reaction got so bad that it even reached Congress. The U.S. House of Representatives held meetings on the matter in 1989. Woody Allen was very against colorization and said it was cultural butchery. A lot of film groups like the Directors Guild and the American Film Institute spoke out against the practice. Some directors, like Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, even bought full-page newspaper ads to say that colorization was damaging to culture. Stephen Bogart, Humphrey Bogart's son, joined the fight. He told Turner in an open letter, "If you don't like old films, don't buy them, but don't ruin them for everyone else." The reaction was so bad that Turner stopped coloring films in secret by 1990. The colorized Casablanca VHS was taken off the shelves and is now a rare collectible item. Some copies sell for hundreds of dollars. The colorized version was never put out on DVD or Blu-ray, and it is now lost to history.